Conversations with Azu Ishekwene.
Do you read newspapers, watch television, or listen to the radio? Are you disturbed by the level of violence, scandals, and deeds of madness dominating the news flow? Have you traveled in recent times and did it feel as if you were driving over dead bodies or rivers of blood? Wait a minute and take a listen. I'm quoting, "There's a part of my job that can swallow you whole." Journalists are brought up on a diet whose main ingredients are a deliberate blend of crime, sex, and money. Everything else is a side dish. That is why if you follow what you read daily in the newspapers, on the radio, or TV, or any of the extensions of the media, you sometimes think the world is going to hell in a handcart. Now sit back as I bring you this riveting discussion about DSS. DSS does not mean Department of State Services. It's an acronym we have adopted for Danger of a Single Story. Yes, we want to examine the other side of the story. Welcome to Conversation with Azu, our weekly diary and politics, on life and politics. With me, as always, is the acclaimed columnist Azu Ishekwene, who traveled by road all the way to Zamfara and has an interesting story to share. Welcome to Conversation, Azu.
Thank you for having me once again, Julius, and welcome from your vacation.
Thank you very much. So you traveled quite a bit of recent, and the other one when you were at the airport in Asaba generated a story about boarding announcers.
Yeah.
So tell us about your trip to Zamfara.
Oh yes, thank you. From Abuja, where I live and work, to Zamfara by road is about 450 kilometers by road. Of course, there are other options. You could go by air, but Zamfara does not have an airport. So if you go by air, you probably would either stop in Kaduna, or you go to Sokoto,
or you go to Kano,
and continue, which is further off, and continue the journey by road from any of those locations. Or you can go by train to Kaduna, and then from Kaduna to Zaria and on to Zamfara, you then continue the journey by road. But unfortunately, which would have been my preferred option, but the train services are not as, in the last couple of weeks, they're not as reliable as they used to be. The timings are not regular, services not what they used to be. So decided to make the trip by road. Through Kaduna to Zaria and of course to Gusau in Zamfara.
You drove through bandit territory.
Oh yes, well I did, and now I can laugh about it, I guess. But preparing for the trip was not a laughing matter. It was only at the last minute that I told my wife that when I made up my mind, there was nothing she could do. So it was quite an adventure. I didn't go alone, as I said in my article. I traveled with a few other colleagues from here to Zaria, and then we met with others in Zaria, and then continued the trip from there. But from here in Abuja, I left with Mr. Adinga Ruliba of AIT and Malam Ahmed Shekarau, the Group Chief Executive Officer of Trust. So the three of us chatted car and then made it to Zaria from where, and then of course we made it to Zaria. There was no escort. We just made it to Zaria on our own with the driver. But then from Zaria to Zamfara, which is the trickier and perhaps more concerning part of the trip, we had some escorts take us through the trip.
Yeah, well, all right. That's so directly related to your article now, Danger of a Single Story. News from Zamfara is always about banditry, kidnapping, ransom, violence, and all of that. What did your trip reveal circumstance?
Quite interesting, to be honest. One of the first things I did, as I said in my column, was to ask ChatGPT to give me a risk analysis. Did ChatGPT think it was safe for me to travel to Zamfara or not, but your guess is as good as mine. But here is the thing about what ChatGPT tells you. ChatGPT aggregates everything that we write,
We report.
that we report, and it is out of that feed that it shares its own perspective with you. So it's what you give ChatGPT, part of what you give ChatGPT that is refined in these different forms, and then it's returned to you. So I wasn't particularly surprised because the reporting on Zamfara and many other parts of the country, especially in the northwest and northeast, particularly, has not been great. So to expect ChatGPT to give me a different response would have been, I would just have been deceiving myself. The boy he said it flat out, flagged a number of travel advisories from other countries, and then ended by saying, except it's an essentially important trip, don't travel.
I'm promising our viewers that I'll bring that extract from on the chat GPT bit for them for their listening pleasure. So one bit of now directly to the reason for your trip, it was a media chat with Governor Dauda Lawal.
Yes, correct.
All right. So what one bit of information from your report that shocked me was the fact that Zamfara, until Governor Lawal, Zamfara still paid 7,000 naira as minimum wage. Like the minimum wage has been raised 3 times since then. It was raised to 18,000 naira, it was raised to 30,000 naira, and is currently 70,000 naira. And his state was still paying 7,000.
Now, if you think if you think that was appalling, even that 7,000 naira was owed. There was arrears for those 7,000 naira for 4 months. All right, which Governor Lawal then, of course, said he had to clear. But I think that the greatest surprise, or the more concerning thing, really is, I think what happened in Zamfara, sort of experience I had in Zamfara and a couple of other states where I've been to outside Abuja recently, it's also a reflection of the quality of reporting, of the quality of journalism that we get from our reporters, our correspondents, or stringers, or freelancers in this location. You ordinarily would, it shouldn't come to you as a surprise. The governor has been there 2 years. You shouldn't be hearing just now that people in Zamfara were earning 4,000 naira. Some people there who are supposed to do the job of journalism ought to have given us that feedback. I mean, it was also the first time that I heard that Zamfara, which was created in 1996, after 29 years, was just getting its first traffic light. And so the question that you ask yourself is, what kind of reporting comes not just from Zamfara, but from so many other states? So I think the greater challenge really is for us as professionals to place a greater demand on our reporters or our representatives in these various locations, so that we can get a more balanced, more authentic, more reliable, more dependable information from these locations.
So again on the danger of a single story, some reactions to your column are already indicating that probably
I left too early.
And you're laughing and you left too early, and that perhaps you were also on a guided tour.
Yes.
But is it possible to be deliberate and intentional about curbing negativity in media content?
Absolutely.
Yes. Can we do developmental journalism,
absolutely.
and where people don't like the government agencies will argue, don't kind of lionize terrorism and crime. And
no, I mean, absolutely. I believe that it's possible to do that. But again, I go to the point of more of the older, more senior people in the profession placing, if I may put it that way, higher demand on what we get from these states and these locations. I think that is where it all begins from. It's very, very possible. I am not saying or suggesting that everything that is happening either in Zamfara or in any others, in many other parts of the country, couldn't be better. That things are rosy, but there are not many parts of this country today where, based essentially on the reporting that we get in the media, where you feel safe to travel to without some form of reinforcement, if you like. I mean, even if you had to travel, even if it wasn't Zamfara, I'm sure that a number of people, especially the elite, those in the political class, they had to travel to Lagos from Abuja by road. They have to go by, they have to find some form of security to lead them. And night travel the Federal Road Safety Commission has said night travel is a no-no, virtually any part of the country, yet we still have these services provided. So in defiance of the odds, sometimes, because that obviously is the only way that many people, the bulk of Nigeria's population can afford to travel. Not many people can afford the cost of 360 or 380,000 naira return ticket for a 1-hour trip. All right. So yes, to answer your question directly, I believe it's absolutely possible. But it begins by the managers, especially in the mainstream media, placing a lot more demand on the type of content that we get from these locations. I'll give you just one example. That's okay. I mean, I remember the last very unfortunate and sad incident in Benue when, persons were killed the first reports coming out of there said 200, some said 250. But then I put a call directly to the reporter and asked the reporter, did you actually count 200 or 250? Where did this come from? By the time, like the fowl of Mecca, the proverbial story of the fowl of Mecca, when somebody said, have you been to Mecca? He said, if you have ever been to Mecca, the fowl in Mecca is as big as this. And then the interlocutor said, are you sure? And then the man brought his hand down, maybe like this. Are you sure like this? Until he got to something that's closer to the size, to the real size. I think these are the kinds of engagements. We really need to engage and interrogate some of these things a bit more. Not because we want to, provide rose-tinted information, but because we want to be absolutely responsible and sure of the facts that we're sharing. And I believe it's possible for us to start understanding it.
All right. If you don't read this column, you wouldn't be doing justice to yourself. Take a listen for yet another excerpt on GPT this time around. I quote, I asked ChatGPT for a risk analysis. The summary was, don't go, except it's essential. It flags travel advisories by the UK Foreign Office, Australia, Canada, and the US with dire warnings against traveling because of violence, banditry, and kidnapping, saying the overwhelming consensus from travel authorities is not to recommend traveling to Zamfara State unless absolutely required. End of quote. Now, a more interesting question directly from your column. Yeah. Tell us a bit about the rosary and anointing oil you found in your traveling bag.
My wife is always doing these things. She has a phobia. She has a phobia for travel. She has a very high phobia for travel. Now, that obviously became heightened when it then became travel to Zamfara. Her phobia was obviously quite heightened. And as I said, I told her only maybe just about 1 or 2 days to the trip. I mean, so she was desperate to stop me. She could, but when it became clear to her that she couldn't, she just had to invent something that would give her some form of comfort. And interestingly, because she put it in the side pocket, my bag, and I didn't think there was nothing I put there that I needed. It was when I returned from the trip and I started emptying my bag that, I then said, how did this get here? And he said, what do you know? But I think that it's a concern that we all share when loved ones. But interestingly also, I must say for long stretches of that trip, you could still make and receive calls, which is an improvement from the reports that we had at some point during the problem in the Northwest, many parts of the Northwest, that telephone masts had been destroyed and people couldn't make calls. And I don't know, it may well be the case in some remote locations. But I'm saying that on this trip, I cannot remember. Sometimes the signal was a bit spotty, but there wasn't many times when, or long stretches for which one was completely out of signal. So considerable parts of the trip, you are still able to stay in touch, which is important. Such trips.
Well, but I think this is a nice place to pull a curtain on this discussion about the danger of the single story. And if you want to confirm whether Azu watches Kannywood movies in addition to writing columns,
I watch it at
read
some
this,
point.
read this article or visit our webpage at azuishekwene.com. Azu, thank you for coming on the conversation.
And welcome back, and thanks for having me once again.
Bye for now.
Conversations with Azu Ishekwene.